The massive warship Dominion floated in the dark space between stars. Inside its metal halls, Commander Taiho studied the glowing screen before him. The blue and green planet called Earth spun slowly in the display. It looked peaceful from this distance, beautiful even, but the data told a different story. "Captain Minji, come look at this," Taiho called to his second-in-command. Minji walked across the bridge, her boots clicking on the metal floor. She was smaller than most Deathworlders, but her purple skin bore the scars of a dozen battles. Her people came from a planet where the air itself could burn your lungs. She had survived worse than most. "What do you see, Commander?" she asked. Taiho pointed at the numbers scrolling down the screen. "The gravity on this world is 40% higher than our standard. The atmospheric pressure would crush most of our allies. And look at this." The screen changed to show creatures living on Earth. Giant beasts with massive teeth roamed through. Green forests. In the oceans, things with tentacles longer than their ship hunted smaller prey. Even the plant life looked dangerous, with thorns and poison dripping from leaves. "The locals call these things sharks," Taiho said, showing an image of a gray creature with rows of sharp teeth. "They have survived unchanged for millions of years. Perfect killing machines." Minji nodded slowly. "And the humans live alongside these creatures?" "Not just live alongside them. Watch this." The display showed humans swimming in the same waters as the sharks. Others ran through forests filled with predators. Some climbed mountains so high that the air was too thin to breathe properly. Children played in water that would freeze most species solid in minutes. "This makes no sense," Minji said. "How can such a weak species survive on such a hostile world?" Taiho switched to another screen. This one showed human cities. Millions of the creatures lived packed together in structures that reached toward the sky. They had built roads that crossed entire continents. Their ships moved across oceans that could swallow planets. "They are not weak," Taiho said quietly. "They just look weak." The bridge doors opened and Admiral Kento walked in. He was old even by galactic standards, and his green skin had turned gray with age. He commanded the entire Deathworlder fleet. Behind him walked 3 other officers, each from different worlds that specialized in warfare. "Commander, what is your assessment?" Admiral Kento asked. Taiho stood straight. "Sir, this will not be a simple operation. The humans have adapted to their environment in ways we have never seen. They appear to thrive in conditions that would kill most of our troops." "Admiral," Kento laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Commander, you worry too much. These humans have not even achieved faster than light travel. Their weapons are primitive. They fight with metal projectiles and chemical explosives. But sir, their planet is irrelevant. We are Deathworlders. We conquer the unconquerable. We have taken worlds from species far more advanced than these humans." One of the other officers stepped forward. Commander Yuki came from a world where the ground itself tried to eat anything that stood still too long. "Admiral, perhaps we should study them more. These recreational activities they perform seem unusual." The screen showed humans again. This time they were running for hours across difficult ground. Others lifted heavy objects repeatedly for no clear purpose. Some threw themselves out of flying vehicles with only thin fabric to slow their fall. "They call it sport," Minji said. "They do these things for enjoyment." Admiral Kento waved his hand dismissively. "Primitive rituals, nothing more. The Galactic Defense Consortium has decided. This species must be contained before they develop dangerous technology. Earth will be placed under our protection." Taiho felt something cold in his stomach. He had read the reports more carefully than the others. Humans did not just survive on their deadly world. They had spread to every corner of it, from the hottest deserts to the coldest ice fields, from the deepest oceans to the highest mountains. They lived in places where nothing else could live. "How many troops are we deploying?" Taiho asked. 2,000 of our finest Deathworlder soldiers, Admiral Kento replied. "More than enough for a primitive species that has not even reached their own moon." Minji looked at Taiho with concern. She had noticed his worried expression. "Sir, humans have reached their moon several times. They also have stations in orbit around their planet." Admiral Kento's expression darkened. Irrelevant. 2000. Deathworlders could conquer most civilized worlds. A single primitive planet should take 3 days at most. The planning session continued for hours. Taiho watched as tactical displays showed landing zones across Earth. 12 teams would strike simultaneously at major human cities. Each team contained elite soldiers from the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. Lieutenant Hyunwoo would lead the sole insertion team. He was young but had survived the acid rains of Nexus Prime. Sergeant Jisoo commanded the mountain specialists who could breathe in air so thin it barely existed. Captain Dongmin had lived through jungle warfare on worlds where every plant wanted to kill you. Each team will secure their target zone and wait for human surrender, Admiral Kento explained. Once they realize they cannot fight us, they will submit to consortium authority. Simple and clean. Taiho studied the human cities on the display. They were massive beyond imagination. Seoul alone held 10 million humans. New York held 8 million. Tokyo held 14 million. These were not small settlements that could be easily controlled. Admiral, what if they do not surrender? He asked. Then we will demonstrate our superior technology until they understand their situation, Admiral Kento replied. As the meeting ended, Minji approached Taiho privately. You are not convinced this will be easy. Taiho looked back at the image of Earth on the main screen. Minji, I have studied every report we have on humans. They do not surrender easily. When their cities are attacked, they fight harder. When their people are threatened, they become dangerous. But they are primitive. Are they? They have nuclear weapons. They have spacecraft. They have global communications. Most importantly, they have survived on a planet that kills everything else that tries to live there. Minji was quiet for a moment. What do you think will happen? Taiho watched the data streams showing human activity across Earth. Millions of them moved through their cities every day. They worked in conditions that would be considered torture on most worlds. They lived lives that would break the minds of softer species. I think, Taiho said slowly, that we are about to learn why this planet created such creatures. And I think the lesson will be more expensive than the Admiral expects. The invasion fleet began its approach to Earth. 2,000 of the galaxy's finest warriors prepared for what they believed would be an easy victory over a primitive species. None of them understood that they were not invading a world populated by weak creatures who had barely survived in harsh conditions. They were invading a world populated by apex predators who had turned the most dangerous planet in the galaxy into their home. The assessment was complete. The invasion would begin at dawn, Earth time. Taiho could only hope that 500 years of Deathworlder superiority had prepared them for what they were about to face. The invasion began at sunrise. 12 dropships fell through Earth's atmosphere like burning stars. Each one carried elite Deathworlder troops trained on the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. They expected 3 days of easy victory against primitive humans. They were wrong from the very first minute. Lieutenant Hyunwoo felt his dropship shake as it broke through the clouds above Seoul. Through the small window, he could see the massive human city spreading out below. Millions of buildings reached toward the sky. Roads filled with moving vehicles stretched in every direction. Landing in 30 seconds, the pilot called out. Target zone is clear. Hyunwoo checked his weapon and looked at his 12 soldiers. They came from worlds where the air could melt metal and the ground tried to swallow anything that moved. Seoul would be simple compared to their home planets. The dropship touched down in a large park in the center of the city. Hyunwoo was the first one out. His boots hit grass that felt soft under his feet. Trees provided shade from the gentle sunlight. Birds sang in the branches above. It was almost peaceful. Too quiet, muttered Sergeant Daeho, scanning the area with his weapon ready. Hyunwoo agreed. Intelligence reports said Seoul held 10 million humans. Where were they all? The answer came 30 seconds later when the ground exploded beneath their feet. Humans erupted from hidden bunkers that had been invisible to their orbital scans. They wore green uniforms and carried weapons that looked primitive but fired with deadly accuracy. The metal projectiles punched through Deathworlder armor, like it was made of soft clay. Contact. Contact. Hyunwoo shouted into his radio as his troops scattered for cover. But there was no cover. Every tree, every bench, every small building had been turned into a fighting position. Humans appeared from underground tunnels, from rooftops, from places that should have been empty. Private Jinwoo screamed as a human projectile tore through his leg. The wound was not fatal, but the pain was incredible. How could such primitive weapons hurt so much? These bullets are designed to cause maximum damage, Daeho observed, pulling Jinwoo to safety behind a fountain. They expand when they hit flesh. More humans appeared from all directions. They moved with coordination that suggested years of planning. Every street corner had been prepared. Every possible escape route was covered. Hyunwoo tried to call for support but found his communications jammed. Somehow these primitive humans were blocking signals from the most advanced communication system in the galaxy. 2,000 kilometers away, Captain Dongmin was learning that jungles could be deadlier than any weapon. His team had landed in the Amazon rainforest, far from major human cities. Intelligence suggested it would be empty, except for scattered primitive tribes. They could establish a base and advance on human population centers from there. The jungle had other plans. Within an hour of landing, Dongmin had lost 3 soldiers to creatures that should not exist. Insects the size of his fist dissolved their armor with acid. Vines covered in thorns wrapped around Corporal Nari and began to squeeze until her bones cracked. "Sir, the plants are moving," Private Junho said, his voice tight with fear. Dongmin looked around. The soldier was right. Branches that had been above their heads were now reaching down toward them. Flowers that had been closed were opening to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. The humans have been breeding these things, Dongmin realized with horror. This entire forest is a weapon. A scream echoed through the trees. Sergeant Hwayong had stepped on what looked like normal ground. It had immediately begun to digest his boot. The soil itself was hungry, but the worst part was the humans. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts through the green maze. They knew every path, every dangerous plant, every hidden trap. They moved through their deadly jungle like it was a safe garden. When they attacked, they used the forest itself as cover. A human would fire once from behind a tree, then vanish into undergrowth that would kill anyone who tried to follow. Dongmin watched his elite jungle warfare specialists get picked apart by enemies who had turned their entire environment into an ally. High in the Himalayas, Sergeant Jisoo was discovering that humans had made friends with the sky itself. Her mountain team had been dropped on a peak that rose 8,000 meters above sea level. The air was so thin that even Deathworlders struggled to breathe. Ice and snow covered everything. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. It should have been empty except for rock and wind. Instead, they found humans living there by choice. A small research station sat on the mountain like it belonged there. Humans moved around outside wearing only light clothing. They breathed the thin air easily. Some of them were even playing in the snow. How are they surviving this? Private Sunmi asked, her breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The answer came when the attack started. The humans did not just live on the mountain. They had become part of it. Avalanches crashed down exactly where Jisoo's troops took cover. Rockfalls blocked their escape routes. The humans had spent years learning how to make the mountain itself fight for them. When her soldiers tried to advance, they found the paths had been turned into deadly traps. What looked like solid ground was actually thin ice over deep crevasses. What seemed like safe shelter was positioned directly under unstable snow that could bury them alive. The humans moved across this deadly landscape like they were walking through their own backyard. Meanwhile, in 12 different locations around Earth, the same pattern repeated. The invasion force discovered that they were not fighting a primitive species that happened to live on a dangerous world. They were fighting a species that had learned to dance with danger until it became their partner. Back in Seoul, Hyunwoo crouched, behind the ruined fountain with only 4 soldiers left alive. Human forces surrounded them completely. The weapon fire had stopped, but not because the humans had run out of ammunition. A voice called out in perfect galactic standard. Alien soldiers, you are surrounded. Surrender now, and you will not be harmed. Hyunwoo looked at his remaining troops. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. Deathworlders did not surrender to primitives. We are elite soldiers from the Galactic Defense Consortium, he called back. You cannot defeat us. Laughter echoed from multiple directions. Human laughter. It was not the sound of fear or desperation. It was the sound of predators who had just realized their prey was trapped. Elite soldiers? The human voice replied. You have been on our planet for 6 hours. We have been studying your weapons, your tactics, and your technology since the moment you arrived. A small device flew over the fountain and landed at Hyunwoo's feet. It was one of their own communication units, but modified with human technology. We have also been monitoring your conversations with your fleet, the human continued. Would you like to hear what happened to your other teams? Static filled the air, then voices. Dongmin screaming for evacuation from the jungle. Jisoo calling for medical support that would never come. Team after team reporting casualties, equipment failure, and impossible human tactics. You came here expecting to find primitives, the human said. Instead, you found a species that has been preparing for war since the day we learned to make fire. Hyunwoo realized that the invasion was not failing. It had already failed. The only question was whether any of them would live long enough to warn the fleet. 2 months had passed since the invasion began. What should have been 3 days of easy victory had become a nightmare that consumed soldiers like hungry fire. Commander Taiho stared at the casualty reports on his command screen aboard the Dominion. The numbers made no sense. Of 2,000 elite Deathworlder troops, fewer than 300 remained operational. The rest were dead, missing, or broken beyond repair. How is this possible? Admiral Kento demanded, pacing behind Taiho's chair. The old warrior's green skin had turned almost gray with stress. These are primitives. They should have surrendered the moment they saw our superior technology. Taiho did not answer immediately. He was reading the latest report from Private Suman, one of the few survivors from the Australian desert operation. The human settlement she had discovered was not a military base. It was a place where human families lived by choice. Children played outside in temperatures that would kill most galactic species in minutes. The sand was so hot it could melt metal, yet humans walked on it with bare feet. They don't just survive their environment, Taiho said quietly. They have made it their friend. Suman's report included video footage that made Taiho's blood run cold. Human children racing across burning sand while laughing. Adults working in the sun for hours without protection. Old humans sitting in shade and watching the young ones play in heat that was literally deadly to most forms of life. These were not soldiers. These were ordinary people living ordinary lives on a planet that would be classified as a weapons testing ground by any reasonable military. Captain Minji, show Admiral Kento the Arctic reports, Taiho ordered. Minji activated another screen. Captain Yongsu appeared, or what was left of him. Ice crystals covered his purple skin. His breathing came in short gasps. Behind him, the bodies of his soldiers lay scattered across snow that stretched to the horizon. We found them, Admiral, Yongsu said in the recording. The humans in the frozen zone. But sir, they're not hiding from the cold. They're playing in it. The video feed switched to show human settlements built directly on ice that never melted. Children threw balls of frozen water at each other and laughed when they got hit. Adults swam in water so cold it should have stopped their hearts immediately. 90% casualties to environmental hazards alone, Yongsu continued. Not enemy fire, the cold itself. Sir, these humans don't need weapons. They live in weapons. Admiral Kento watched the recording in silence. When it ended, he turned to Taiho. What do your other teams report? Taiho activated screen after screen. Each one told the same impossible story. The ocean team had discovered humans who spent their lives on water that could sink their largest ships. They rode waves, taller than buildings for entertainment. They dove to depths that would crush most beings and came back up holding food they had caught with their bare hands. The mountain teams reported humans living at altitudes where the air was too thin to support life. These humans climbed higher, mountains for fun, carrying heavy packs and sleeping on rock faces that dropped thousands of meters to certain death. The forest teams found humans who ran through territories filled with predators that could tear apart armored vehicles. These humans called it jogging and did it every morning before going to work. Every environment we encounter, we find humans who have not just adapted to it, Tai-Ho explained. They have learned to love it. They seek out the most dangerous places on their planet and build homes there. In the depths of Earth's oceans, Corporal Sunho led the last surviving members of the aquatic assault team. They had expected to find empty water and maybe a few primitive fishing boats. Instead, they found underwater cities. Humans had built settlements on the ocean floor connected by tunnels that stretched between continents. They harvested food from creatures that could swallow their submarines whole. They lived and worked in pressure that would flatten most beings instantly. "Sir, they're farming the dangerous ones," Sunho reported to the fleet through encrypted channels. "The humans are raising the giant squid like livestock. They've domesticated predators that eat metal." But the most terrifying discovery was still to come. Deep in a human research facility that had survived orbital bombardment, the aliens found something that changed their understanding of everything. Earth was not naturally this hostile. The humans had been making it worse on purpose. For thousands of years, human scientists had been breeding more dangerous animals. They had created new diseases to test their medical abilities. They had altered their environment to be more challenging, more deadly, more impossible to survive. They had turned their entire planet into a training ground. They've been preparing for us, Tai-Ho realized as he read the research data. Not specifically for us, but for anything that might threaten them. They've spent millennia making sure that nothing in the universe could be worse than what they face every day. The communication screen activated and Admiral Kento's face appeared. He looked older than before, and his eyes held something that had not been there at the beginning of the invasion. Fear. "Commander, I am ordering full orbital bombardment of major population centers. We will render this planet uninhabitable if necessary." "Sir, our troops are still on the surface." "All surface. Teams are to be considered lost. This is no longer a containment operation. This is survival." Tai-Ho knew the bombardment would not work. The humans had built their cities to survive attacks from space. They had been planning for this possibility since they first looked up at the stars and realized they were not alone. But he followed orders. The Dominion's main weapons powered up and targeted the largest human cities. The bombardment began at dawn, Earth time. Massive energy blasts struck targets across the planet. Cities vanished in clouds of fire and dust. Mountains were leveled. Forests burned. For 6 hours, the fleet poured destruction onto Earth's surface. When the smoke cleared, they discovered that they had accomplished nothing except making the humans angry. The cities had been empty. The humans had evacuated into underground complexes that ran deeper than the aliens' deepest scans could detect. They had moved millions of people in a matter of hours through tunnel systems that spanned continents. Worse, the bombardment had triggered responses that the humans seemed to have planned for. Volcanic activity increased across the planet. Earthquakes shook regions that had been stable for centuries. Ocean currents shifted, changing weather patterns globally. The humans had not just prepared for invasion. They had prepared to use planetary bombardment as a weapon against the attackers. "They knew we would do this," Tai-Ho said to Minji as they watched seismic readings from Earth's surface. "They've been waiting for someone to make this exact mistake." On the planet below, fewer than 50 alien soldiers remained alive. They huddled in the ruins of their landing zones, surrounded by a world that had been transformed from merely dangerous to actively hostile. The humans had not just survived the bombardment. They had used it to make their planet an even more effective weapon, and now they were hunting the survivors. The orbital bombardment had failed completely. Worse than failed. It had given the humans exactly what they wanted. Commander Tai-Ho studied the seismic readings from Earth's surface with growing horror. The bombardment had not destroyed human civilization. It had awakened something that had been sleeping beneath their feet. "Volcanic activity has increased by 400%, reported Science Officer Moran. Her yellow skin had turned pale as she read the data. "Earthquake frequency is up by 600%. Ocean temperatures are rising rapidly. Is the planet dying? Admiral Kento asked hopefully. No, sir. It's becoming more active, more dangerous. The humans appear to have triggered some kind of planetary defense system. Taiho switched the main screen to show intercepted human communications. The aliens had learned to decode human languages during the invasion, though they still could not understand human thinking. They're evacuating surface populations to underground cities, he reported. But listen to this. A human voice filled the command center, speaking in excited tones to another human somewhere else on the planet. The seismic charges worked perfectly. The Yellowstone system is responding exactly as the models predicted. We should have full planetary activation within 72 hours. Another human voice responded with what could only be described as enthusiasm. Excellent. The thermal vents in the Pacific are already showing increased activity. The new volcanic islands should be surfacing right on schedule. Admiral Kento stared at the screen in disbelief. They're happy about this? Taiho nodded grimly. Sir, I don't think we triggered a planetary defense system. I think we triggered a planetary upgrade system. The truth was becoming clear through intercepted research data and captured equipment. Humans had been preparing their planet for exactly this kind of attack for centuries. They had placed charges in fault lines, built triggers near volcanic systems, and created methods to increase their world's hostility on demand. When faced with orbital bombardment, they had not tried to protect their cities. They had used the bombardment to make their entire planet more dangerous. On the surface, Corporal Sunho crouched in the ruins of what had been a human research station. Only 12 alien soldiers remained from his original team of 200. They were the last survivors of the Ocean Assault Group. Around them, the landscape had changed completely. Where there had been solid ground, new geysers of boiling water now erupted regularly. The air itself seemed heavier, filled with gases that made breathing difficult, even with advanced filtration systems. Sir, you need to see this. Private Kyung-soo called from inside the damaged building. Sunho crawled through the rubble to where Kyung-soo had found a human computer system that was somehow still functioning. The screen showed a map of Earth with thousands of blinking lights. What am I looking at? Sunho asked. I think it's their monitoring system for the planetary changes. Look at these readings. The numbers were staggering. Atmospheric pressure was increasing across the entire planet. Gravity was becoming stronger in some regions as massive underground systems shifted. Temperature ranges were expanding, making some areas hotter and others colder than anything previously recorded. But the most disturbing part was the timeline. This was not random destruction. This was controlled, planned environmental modification, happening according to a precise schedule. They're terraforming their own planet, Sunho realized. But not to make it easier to live on. They're making it harder. A new voice came through their intercepted communications. This one spoke with the authority of someone in command of the entire human response. All population centers report successful relocation to Phase 2 shelters. Surface operations can now proceed without civilian risk. Initiate Scenario 7 protocols. Another human voice responded. Confirmed, releasing enhanced atmospheric agents in 30 seconds. All surface activity should show immediate improvement in hostility ratings. Sunho felt his blood turn cold. Enhanced atmospheric agents? What does that mean? The answer came when the wind changed direction. Suddenly, breathing became much more difficult. The air itself seemed to burn their lungs. Even through their advanced filters, plants around them began to grow visibly faster, and not in a good way. Vines erupted from the ground with thorns that dripped something that dissolved their armor on contact. Trees grew new branches that reached toward them with obvious hunger. Even the grass under their feet became sharp enough to cut through their boots. The atmosphere is becoming toxic to us, Kyung-soo observed, checking his suit's readings. But look at this. It's not toxic to Earth life. It's making Earth life stronger. High above them in orbit, Commander Taiho was reaching the same conclusion. Through different data, the humans were not just defending their planet, they were actively improving it as a weapon against invaders. They've been planning this for generations, he told Captain Minji. Every system on their planet has been modified to respond to outside attack by becoming more dangerous. But sir, how could they survive these changes themselves? Taiho called up human medical data they had captured earlier in the invasion. The answer was as simple as it was terrifying. They can't. Not the current generation. But they've been modifying themselves too. Each generation of humans is slightly more resistant to their planet's hostility. They've been evolving themselves along with their world. The humans were not just fighting the invasion. They were using it as an opportunity to advance their own development by centuries. Every challenge the aliens presented, the humans turned into a test that made them stronger. On the surface, the remaining alien troops were learning this lesson in the most direct way possible. Lieutenant Hyun-woo, now the senior surviving officer, in Seoul, watched his last 4 soldiers struggle with equipment that was failing faster than they could repair it. The enhanced atmosphere was not just making breathing difficult, it was corroding their technology at an accelerated rate. "Sir, our weapons are dissolving," Sergeant Daeho reported. "The metal is just falling apart." Human weapons, however, seemed to work perfectly in the new environment. If anything, they were more effective than before. Human soldiers moved through the toxic air without protection, their bodies already adapted to the changes. They knew exactly what would happen, Hyun-woo said to his remaining troops. They knew we would bombard their cities. They knew we would try to make their planet uninhabitable, and they prepared for all of it. A human patrol appeared through the toxic fog that now covered most of the city. They moved with the confidence of people walking through their own garden. Their leader called out in galactic standard, "Alien soldiers, this is your final opportunity to surrender." In 6 more hours, the atmospheric changes will reach levels that will be lethal to your species, even with life support. Hyun-woo looked at his soldiers. They were dying already. Their equipment was failing, their supplies were nearly gone, and they were breathing air that was slowly poisoning them. But they were Deathworlders. They had survived the worst conditions in the galaxy. "We will never surrender to primitives," he called back. The humans' response was not anger. It was something much worse. It was pity. "You still don't understand, do you? You're not fighting primitives. You're fighting a species that turned the most dangerous planet in the galaxy into their home by making it more dangerous every day. We are elite soldiers from worlds that would kill your entire species." "Yes," the human agreed. "And we're elite survivors from the one world that kills everything else. The difference is that we chose to be here." As if to emphasize the point, the ground beneath their feet began to shake, not from weapons or explosions, but from the planet itself responding to human commands. In space, Admiral Kento made the decision that would define the rest of his military career. "All ships prepare to withdraw from this system. We are abandoning the surface operation." "Sir, what about our troops on the ground?" Admiral Kento looked at the readings from Earth's surface. Atmospheric toxicity was rising. Seismic activity was increasing. The entire planet was becoming more hostile by the hour, and all of it was under human control. "Our troops on the ground are already dead. They just don't know it yet." The withdrawal order went out to the fleet. They would leave the survivors behind and report back to the Galactic Defense Consortium that Earth was too dangerous for conquest. But as the ships prepared to depart, long-range sensors detected something that changed everything. Human spacecraft were launching from the planet's surface. Primitive chemical rockets were carrying humans away from their toxic world and into space. They were not fleeing their dying planet. They were expanding to the stars, and they were using alien technology, captured from the invasion, to do it. 23 alien soldiers remained alive on the entire planet. They had retreated to what their sensors said was the most defensible position on Earth, a remote research station in Antarctica, surrounded by ice and emptiness. They were wrong about it being empty. Commander Taiho received the final transmission from the surface at 0347 ship time. The voice belonged to Engineer Minho, one of the last survivors from the Antarctic team. "Fleet Command, this is Ground Team 7. We have secured the research facility, but sir, something is very wrong here." Taiho leaned forward in his command chair. Through the static, Minho's voice carried a fear that Deathworlder training was supposed to eliminate. "Report, Engineer." "Sir, this place was never empty. The humans knew we would come here. They've been waiting for us." The transmission included video feed from Minho's suit camera. The Antarctic Research Station looked exactly as their intelligence reports had described. A cluster of metal buildings connected by enclosed walkways, surrounded by endless ice and snow. But the details were wrong. The buildings were too clean. The walkways showed no wear from weather. Most disturbing of all, there were lights on inside, and the lights were warm and welcoming. "Sir, there are humans here. They live here, in temperatures that should kill them instantly." Through the video feed, Taiho could see movement inside the buildings. Humans walked around in light clothing, completely comfortable in an environment that registered 40 degrees below freezing outside the heated structures. But these were not researchers hiding from the cold. These were people who had chosen to make their home in the most lifeless place on Earth. "They're studying us," Minho continued, his voice growing more frightened. "Sir, they have recordings of our conversations. They have copies of our equipment. They know our names." The transmission switched to show the inside of one of the research buildings. Walls were covered with photographs of alien soldiers taken during the invasion. Equipment captured from landing sites was neatly arranged on tables. Most terrifying of all, there were detailed medical charts showing alien anatomy and physiology. "They've been dissecting our dead," Minho whispered. Taiho felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Engineer, extract immediately. Do not engage with human forces." "Sir, I don't think we can. They're all around us." The video feed showed what Minho meant. Through the windows of the research station, figures moved across the ice. Dozens of them. They wore white clothing that made them nearly invisible against the snow, but their movement was coordinated and purposeful. These were not scientists. These were soldiers who had been waiting in the most remote place on Earth for the aliens to find them. "This whole thing has been a trap," Minho realized out loud. "They wanted us to come here." The communication screen activated, and Captain Minji appeared. Her purple skin was pale with exhaustion. She had been monitoring human transmissions for months, trying to understand their strategy. "Commander, you need to hear this," she said, activating an audio file. A human voice filled the command center. It spoke Galactic Standard perfectly, with no accent or hesitation. "Final phase of the containment exercise is proceeding as expected. Surviving alien forces have been guided to Location 7 as planned. Data collection has exceeded all projections," another human voice responded. "Confirmed. Biological samples are complete. Technology analysis is complete. Strategic assessment is complete. We are ready to proceed with the next phase." Taiho stared at the speakers in disbelief. "Containment exercise? They've been treating our invasion as a training mission?" Captain Minji nodded grimly. "Sir, we've been monitoring their global communications. The human military losses have been minimal. Most of the resistance we faced came from civilian volunteers." "Civilians?" "Yes, sir. The humans used our invasion as an opportunity to train their population in anti-alien warfare tactics. They've been studying our equipment, our strategies, and our biology since the moment we landed. The truth was worse than complete military defeat. It was complete irrelevance. The humans had not been fighting for their lives against a superior alien force. They had been learning from what they considered a useful educational opportunity. On the surface, the final confrontation was about to begin. Engineer Minho and his 22 remaining soldiers watched through the research station windows as human figures approached across the ice. They moved with the confidence of people completely at home in conditions that would kill most life forms in the galaxy. "Sir, our weapons are at 15% power," reported Private Sunwoo. "The enhanced atmosphere has been corroding our equipment faster than we can maintain it." Minho checked his own weapon. The metal was pitted and scarred from the toxic air that humans had released during their planetary upgrade. Meanwhile, human weapons seemed to work better than ever in their modified environment. "How many of them are there?" he asked. "Motion sensors show 47 approaching from the south," Corporal Hyungsik replied. "But sir, there are underground thermal signatures all around us. I think there are more beneath the ice." The humans were not approaching for a final desperate battle. They were approaching for a final data collection session. The research station's communication system activated. A calm, human voice spoke to them in perfect galactic standard. "Alien soldiers, I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You are surrounded and outgunned. Your equipment is failing and your supplies are exhausted. I am offering you one final opportunity to surrender with honor. Minho felt a laugh build in his chest. It was not a pleasant sound. Honor? You offer us honor? You are primitives who have not even achieved interstellar flight. That is not entirely accurate, the human replied patiently. We achieved interstellar flight approximately 6 hours ago, using technology we adapted from your invasion force. Our first colony ship is already en route to Alpha Centauri. The words hit Minho like a physical blow. The humans had not just defended their planet. They had used the invasion to advance their own technology by centuries. You used us, he said, quietly. Yes. Your invasion provided us with exactly the external threat we needed to justify accelerating our space program and unifying our global military structure. We are grateful for the opportunity. Through the windows, Minho could see the humans had stopped advancing. They were simply waiting, patient as predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. We will never surrender, he called out, knowing the words were meaningless. That is your choice, Commander Chen replied. But you should know that you will be the last alien soldiers to die on Earth. Not because we plan to kill you, but because we will ensure that no other species ever makes the mistake of trying to invade our world. You cannot threaten the entire galaxy with your primitive technology. Our technology is no longer primitive, and we are not threatening the galaxy. We are simply expanding into it. Other species will be free to join us or avoid us as they choose. Minho looked at his soldiers. They were exhausted, poisoned, and dying slowly in an environment that grew more hostile every hour. They had been trained on the worst worlds in the galaxy, but Earth had proven to be worse than all of them combined. What do you want from us? He asked finally. Information. Specifically the location of your home worlds and the current political structure of your galactic government. In exchange, we will allow you to live as prisoners of war until a formal exchange can be arranged. And if we refuse, then you will die here in the cold, and we will learn what we need to know from the next invasion force your people send. Minho understood now why so few of them had survived. The humans had not been trying to kill all of the invaders. They had been carefully managing the battle to ensure that a few survivors remained to carry information back to the galaxy. They wanted the Galactic Defense Consortium to know exactly how badly the invasion had failed. You planned all of this, he said. We have been planning for contact with hostile alien species since we first developed radio technology. Your invasion was simply the first opportunity to test our preparations. Through the failing communication system in the research station, Minho could hear his own fleet preparing to abandon the system. Admiral Kento was leaving them behind, reporting the mission as a total failure. But it had not been a failure for the humans. It had been the most successful training exercise in their species' history, and now they were ready to carry those lessons to the stars. I will not give you information about our people, Minho said with the last of his professional dignity. That is your choice. But you should consider that we already have most of the information we need from your equipment and captured communications. Your cooperation would simply make our expansion more efficient. Minho looked at his soldiers one final time. They were Deathworlders, bred and trained on planets that could kill with a breath of air or a drop of rain. They had conquered species, far more advanced than these humans. But they had never faced a species that had spent millennia turning their homeworld into the ultimate weapon. We surrender, he said quietly. The words tasted like ashes, but they were the only words that would keep his people alive long enough to warn the galaxy what was coming. The prisoner exchange took place 3 months later in neutral space, far from both Earth and the nearest consortium world. 5 alien soldiers sat in a small transport ship, staring out at the stars they had once thought they ruled. Commander, Taiho looked older than his years. Captain Minji sat beside him, her purple skin bearing new scars from the failed invasion. Lieutenant Hyunwoo, Sergeant Jisoo, and Engineer Minho completed the group of survivors, 5 out of 2,000. Behind them, the Earth system grew smaller in the viewports, but the humans were no longer contained there. Long-range sensors had detected human ships moving toward other star systems, carrying colonists and technology that should have taken them centuries to develop. They kept their word, Minji said, quietly. They released us exactly when they promised. Taiho nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the datapad in his hands. It contained everything they had learned about humanity during their 3 months as prisoners. The information was more terrifying than their military defeat. Did you read the cultural analysis? He asked the others. Hyunwoo shifted uncomfortably, in his seat. The part about their entertainment? Sir, I still don't believe it. During their captivity, the humans had allowed them to observe daily life on Earth. What they saw challenged everything they thought they knew about intelligent species. Humans created fictional stories about their own destruction. They made games where they pretended to fight monsters that could kill them. They gathered in large groups to watch other humans compete in activities that would be considered torture on most worlds. They practice warfare for fun, Jisoo said, her voice still filled with disbelief. Their children play games that simulate combat. Their adults compete in events that test survival skills. Minho looked up from his own notes. It's not just practice, it's conditioning. They've turned their entire culture into a military training program, but they don't even realize it. The transport ship's communication system activated. Admiral Kento's face appeared on the screen, looking haggard and defeated. The old warrior had aged years in the months since the invasion's failure. Survivors, prepare your full report. The Consortium Council is waiting. Taiho straightened in his chair. Admiral, they won't believe what we tell them. They have to believe it. 3 more invasion fleets have gone missing in the past month, all in systems where humans have established colonies. The words hit the survivors like physical blows. Humanity was not just expanding, they were defending their new territories with the same brutal efficiency they had shown on Earth. How many ships? Minji asked. 12,000 vessels. 60,000 of our finest troops, all gone without a trace. Hyunwoo leaned forward. Sir, the humans aren't destroying our fleets. They're capturing them, converting them. Admiral Kento's expression darkened. Explain. During our imprisonment, we observed human engineers working with captured alien technology. They don't just copy our designs. They improve them. Every piece of equipment they take becomes better than the original. Taiho activated his datapad and transmitted files to the Admiral's ship. Sir, the humans have reverse-engineered faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, and shield technology. But they've modified everything to work in hostile environments that would destroy our original equipment. The files showed human ships that looked nothing like traditional consortium designs. They were built to operate in the vacuum of space, the crushing depths of gas-giant atmospheres and the radiation fields around dying stars, environments where no sane species would choose to go. They're not just exploring habitable worlds, Jisoo added. They're colonizing systems we considered worthless because they're too dangerous. Admiral Kento studied the data with growing alarm. How is this possible? Because danger is their natural habitat, Minho explained. We think of hostile environments as obstacles to avoid. They think of them as opportunities to exploit. The transport ship docked with the consortium flagship, Sovereignty, and the 5 survivors were escorted to the main briefing chamber. The Council of Species had assembled to hear their testimony. Representatives from 47 worlds, including the most advanced military minds in the galaxy. Councillor Zeph of the Andorian Empire spoke first. Commanders, explain how 2,000 Deathworlder troops were defeated by a pre-spaceflight species. Taiho stood at attention. Honorable Councillors, humanity is not pre-spaceflight. They are post-spaceflight. They have moved beyond the need for traditional space technology by making their bodies and minds adapt to any environment. Murmurs of disbelief filled the chamber. Councillor Yax of the Crystal Hegemony leaned forward. That is impossible. No species can adapt that rapidly. With respect, Councillor, you're thinking about adaptation in evolutionary terms, Minji replied. Humans adapt culturally, technologically, and socially within single generations. They don't wait for biological evolution. They force it. Hyunwoo activated a holographic display showing human cities. They don't terraform planets to suit their needs. They terraform themselves to suit any planet. Desert worlds, ice worlds, toxic worlds, high radiation worlds. They find ways to make them all habitable. The hologram showed human settlements in environments that violated basic principles of colonization. Cities built inside active volcanoes, using the heat for energy. Underwater colonies in oceans filled with acid. Orbital habitats constructed around pulsars, somehow shielded from radiation that would sterilize most life. Counselor Drix of the Silicon Confederacy spoke with obvious skepticism. These images could be fabricated. Show us proof of their actual capabilities. Jisoo stepped forward and activated another display. This one showed real-time sensor data from the edge of consortium space. This is the Kepler 4042 system, recorded 2 days ago. The display showed a human colony ship approaching a planet that was officially classified as uninhabitable. The world's surface was covered with methane storms. The atmosphere was toxic to all known life, and radiation levels would kill most beings in seconds. The human ship landed anyway. Within hours, construction began on the surface. Humans in protective suits worked to establish a settlement in conditions that should have been instantly lethal. The protective suits lasted exactly 4 hours before the environment destroyed them, Minho reported. After that, the humans continued working without protection. The council chamber fell silent. That's impossible, Counselor Zeph said finally. No, Counselor. That's humanity. Tejo activated the final piece of evidence, a message transmitted from the human settlement on Kepler 442 directly to consortium space. The image showed a human female standing on the toxic planet's surface, breathing the poisonous atmosphere without any visible protection. She spoke in perfect galactic standard. To the Galactic Defense Consortium, we are aware of your concern about human expansion. We wish to assure you that we have no hostile intentions toward any species that chooses to coexist peacefully. The human paused, and something that might have been a smile crossed her features. However, we feel it is important that you understand our position clearly. Earth was the most dangerous planet we could find in this region of space. We made it our home by making it even more dangerous. Every world we colonize now is safer than where we came from. Another pause. We do not seek conflict, but we are prepared for it. We have been preparing for it since we first learned to make fire. Any species that chooses to threaten human colonies will discover that we have spent 10,000 years learning how to turn any environment into a weapon. The message ended, but the implications continued to echo through the council chamber. Counselor, Yak spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. What do you recommend? Taiho looked at his fellow survivors, then back at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Honorable counselors, I recommend that we reclassify humanity immediately. They are not a primitive species that poses a potential threat. They are an advanced species that poses an existential threat to anyone who opposes them. And our response? Complete non-interference. Establish a quarantine zone around all human-controlled systems and forbid any military contact. Trade and diplomacy only, and only on their terms. Admiral Kento's voice carried across the chamber. You're recommending surrender to a species that doesn't even have a proper interstellar fleet. Sir, they don't need a proper interstellar fleet, Hyunwoo replied. They have something better. They have the ability to make any world into Earth, and Earth is the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. The Council voted unanimously to implement the quarantine protocols. But as the survivors returned to their quarters, long-range sensors detected something that made their recommendations irrelevant. Human ships were already crossing into consortium space, not as invaders but as explorers and colonists seeking new challenges in environments that no other species had considered worth claiming. Humanity was expanding not because they needed new worlds, but because they were curious about what other kinds of impossible places the universe might offer. The galaxy was about to discover that there was no such thing as an uninhabitable world when humans were involved. And that was the most terrifying discovery of all.